Hello, I want to welcome you to the Meacham Conversations, and today we have Sebastian Matthews. Sebastian, how are you doing?
Hey Rick, I'm awake.
Awake, very
Coffee
good.
up.
I thought we might begin by having you read a poem.
Okay. This is called Merce and Hazel, Black Mountain College, Summer 1948. And it opens with a quote from the I Ching, the Chinese Book of Changes. A one-eyed man is able to see, a lame man is able to tread. Naming a lake Eden sort of raises the stakes, don't you think? Though, wasn't that the point at Black Mountain? Where the men and women came ready to work? Rice's Socratic attacks on plasticity, Albers's to make open the eyes, and Olson's all night ranting at the local tavern. Heaven above, the lake below. Picture Hazel in her wheelchair, camera in her lap. Someone's helped her to the field, or she's roughed the ruts on her own. Merce has begun his next course in soaring. Earthbound seer, airborne spirit, they inhabit reciprocal zones in the frame. Absolute stillness coupled with essential motion. But don't the eye and finger flick, and the body and space come to momentary rest? Not standstill, but progress. In each new shot, Merce defies even our idea of gravity. He floats out of the frame, hang time galore, then drifts across the lens's ground, a balloon in his own parade. Hazel's in the middle of it all, the traffic of simple creativity swirling around her. At still center, the flag of her vision flaps on its pole, each unfurling clap a shutter click, each breath a hurling jump in the air. Off in the distance, out of the cropped frame, black mountains rise in an old staircase dance. The water on the lake makes its topographic music. Soon it'll be time for dinner and a much-needed break to reload.
Thank you. It's really interesting the way, especially when you use similes and metaphors, you're talking about one thing and the metaphor takes you to this whole other dimension for a second,
Yeah.
then it comes back. It's sort of like the music itself, in a way.
Nice. Well, it's also like, for me, the I Ching, because the I Ching is full of all these incredible metaphors.
Right, yeah.
Everything is always a big lake or the ocean or the mountain. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
So how did that come about?
Yeah, it's a poem that's kind of rich in history, obviously. The Black Mountain College, I live near it in the mountains outside of Asheville, and you know, the avant-garde experimental college in the 30s and the 50s, through the 50s. And all these amazing people were there. And Merce Cunningham, the dancer, started his troupe there. But I never knew about this woman, Hazel Archer, and Larson Archer. She had polio, and she was there, and she was a photographer, and she taught there. And so the idea of him dancing that way, which is really like floating up in the air, and her being in a wheelchair and taking that photograph, a series of photographs of him, just struck my imagination. And then when I found out they were all into the I Ching, and those mountains behind them, it just seemed like, okay, there's a story here in a way.
Yeah.
And so I started taking quotes out of the I Ching and beginning to tell that story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, and your poems about jazz are also interesting in the way they use their metaphors too. And one thing we were talking about earlier is the way in which you're talking about the music and how the music floats and goes, and well, depending on who you're talking about.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's several of the poems have all this background noise in it. Yeah. And as I was saying earlier, sometimes that used to annoy me.
Yeah.
But now I've begun to see it as more of part of the experience of music.
Yeah. For me, I think part of it is that we're more sophisticated about sound. Like now we know that if you've listened to jazz as much as you have, you've heard the old recordings, and now you hear the new stuff. And the old stuff, the stuff that's recorded like at the Village Vanguard, it's recorded really well, but you get the background music. You get the dropped plates and a woman's laugh, and I think it adds to the sense of the recording or to the experience.
Yeah, even, well, you get it more on vinyl, but there are some CDs where they still take the vinyl sound.
Yeah, the pop and
yeah,
yeah.
And you had that little thing, and you think that's part of that old experience.
I like
it puts you back there in a way.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the new music that I listen to in Asheville, they're putting that stuff back in, and they're going back to analog, and they're going back to the old sound.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's warm.
Wow, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it puts you back in that whole context again. Yeah. Another interesting thing is the way you've, when I first met you, you were just writing fiction.
I was 4 years old or something. Yeah.
Well, what I met you as a writer.
Yeah.
I think I was up at Breadloaf.
Yeah.
And you were still at Michigan,
Yep,
and you were writing fiction.
trying,
Yeah.
failing. Yeah.
And I really thought that was going to be what you had done. You'd be
I'm
doing.
back to it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but then you've also you've been involved a little bit in editing and written that autobiography and a lot of poems.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering how you balance those off, or actually how one affects the other.
Yeah. You know, I think it was very self-conscious when I was younger because my parents were poets, my dad and my mom. So I was like, I'm going to, you know, what kind of
Break away.
break away? I'm going to do fiction instead. You know, it's like 2 steps away. But that felt like the move. And then I realized that creative nonfiction and memoir and personal essay was actually narratively more interesting for me, or more doable, possibly. And then, but now it's very fluid. I also make collages and visual photo montages. And so for me, the creative process. It sounds sappy, but I just like kind of getting on a roll and see what comes out, usually on like a notebook, and then when I start putting it down, it's either obviously coming down in lines or not, and usually if it's, I'll start to block it into paragraphs, or I'll know pretty quickly, but I don't really, at the beginning, I don't really care, you know. And I also beginning to find that the hybrid, they're beginning to kind of fall into each other. I'm not so sure it's a good thing, but the poems are getting a little prosy, and the prose is definitely moving, you know,
Yeah, I was going to
lyrically.
ask you how you see that work, especially with the poetry developing over the years.
Well, I've been trying to write shorter, more structured, kind of Horace-like lines to fight that. So now I'm trying to write little pithy, mean-spirited, usually at myself, you know, jab, you know, poems that jab and kind of take swipes, because then I can avoid that kind of lengthy me kind of poem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were in a horrific accident
Yes.
last year, and here you are walking around as if nothing had happened. And how's that affected your writing?
Partly, a friend of mine pointed that out. He said, I wondered if the change in the way the lines are, he said, maybe that changed for you. Because I used to follow the line more like jazz, like let it kind of flow. But really, I think there's a sense of perspective. That also sounds a little corny, but I don't care. My ambition for writing good work is sharper than ever, but like making myself, you know, finding my place in the pantheon or getting famous or making money, which I lost that urge a long time ago. That's kind of gone away. I feel like that's not really the point anymore, and it never was, but it's easy to forget it. But otherwise, just, I mean, my dad said a long time ago, when he was beginning to sense that he was going to, his mortality, he sensed his mortality, he said, get your work done. The last half of your life, the last third of your life is mostly about your family and your work. And that just came into sharp focus.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, both, family first and then the work.
Yeah.
But
Well, the work itself, I mean, you were talking earlier about the montages and how those affect. I wonder if you find yourself being more affected now by, or more influenced now by art rather than the music.
Yeah, I think I hadn't thought about that, but I think it's changed. And I make the art in it's collage. It's not very complicated. I'm not a great artist, but I can move in that realm, and it's very comforting. And it frees up the writing. Yeah, and also looking at art, definitely. Yeah. I make my students do it too, and we cut and paste for a whole class, and they're very happy.
How does your teaching affect your writing? Or your writing affect your teaching?
For me, it's balance. I'm a bit of a prima donna. I don't like teaching too much, so I don't. So I'm teaching. I always teach just a couple classes a semester, and then pay the price of not having enough money. But I have more time to write, and when there's a balance for me, I'm happy. And the third tripod, leg is time with my boy and my wife. I mean, I feel like if I'm not happy with them and I'm not out walking and writing and teaching, I'm always looking for that balance. And
yeah, you have several poems, I think, where he's in.
Yeah,
he figures in.
I know. I think he's getting tired of it,
neat.
and I'm like, sorry.
Oh, really?
Happened to me, it's going to happen to you.
Is that what he thinks? I mean, does he?
Yeah, he's a little bit like, Dad, I don't want to be, but I think he likes it too. He's 9, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us today.
Rick, it's nice to
Okay.
be on
Terrific.
TV with you.
Oh, yeah.